I've talked about Ramesh Balsekar being one of the teachers that introduced me to the non-dual vision and how it seemed positive and then became negative and wanting to find a both and vision. And one of the books that I bought, well, interestingly, I'm just thinking about this right now, Jessica. It was actually 2 books. I read lots of his books. One of them, interestingly, was called Duet for One, which is exactly what I'm saying.
Exactly. Very
even
well
though
said.
I didn't feel like Ramesh was really saying that.
Duet for One.
But that's Duet for One.
It's beautiful.
Is a beautiful poetic version of it. It was his translation of one of the Gitas, the non-dual Gitas, and it was beautiful. And then the other one, the title of the other one, was The Final Truth. And really how, and I read it and I found it very interesting. But I look back now and I think all I know about myself, that why my detector of crazy bullshit wasn't going, do, this guy's, you really? And there's something about that which seems central to this as well.
I think so.
And it's because it's defining the truth as a negative. You said this. It's a non-truth.
Right.
So once you've seen through the self and the illusion of separateness, that's it.
There's nothing to do.
There's nothing to do.
It's a non-teaching.
There's no one to go there and done. You're done. And that's the final truth. And that feels a million miles away from where I am now, which is, well, first of all, the truth is not a thing which you find. The truth is a trustworthy belief. And that trustworthiness is relative to your purposes, to your evolution.
Yeah.
What seems trustworthy now may become untrustworthy later. And when you discover more, it's an evolving thing. So it's not like the truth, which is final. But instead, this much more optimistic thing where you're expanding. And when I look at humanity, look at how we've expanded our understanding. And that feels like what spirituality needs to catch up with. It needs to get that evolutionary insight.
Yeah.
And then take all of the wonderful states it's been exploring and understand them in that way. No final truth.
No, that's amazing. There's something, firstly, very kind of cold about that, the final truth, right? It makes me think of the final solution.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned this.
Continuing on with my sort of dark metaphors here, but I'm trying to do it in jest.
You said this earlier, and I loved it because it's very dark, and you can say it. But and what made me, why it's funny, is because there's a kind of truth in it that it's the eradication of
and
all the selves.
Yeah, and it really is only really meant to describe the most extreme, I think. Because actually, I didn't mention this before, and it frightens me to even say this. One of the books that I had read on my Kindle a few years after my big awakening was called I Hope You Die Soon.
I've heard of
a
that.
Neo-Advaita book by, I don't know, somebody Sylvester or something.
Oh, I know him.
Richard,
yes.
maybe?
Richard Sylvester.
Oh, God.
Yes,
and I don't dare open the book again. I'm afraid that I'll start crying or something. But the other one is, and I can't remember his name, but he's a YouTuber who does a lot of Neo-Advaita stuff. And his weekly talk is called Come Die With Me. It's a culture of death. And that's when I said the sort of suicide cult. It really is. There was that actual suicide cult, right? Where they were all taught to, they committed suicide together.
There's been a few, but I don't know which ones.
Okay, so this was sort of like a spiritual suicide club.
Right.
I think it's a perfect metaphor because I really did go that hardcore. So I do think it's important to say it that way. The final solution, the final, what was it?
Truth.
The final truth. And I really like what you've opened me up to is this vision of potential and how that path is really the end of human potential, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nowhere left to go. There's nothing to do. There's maybe something peaceful about that at a certain point when you're really tired and you've run yourself ragged from this whole human thing. But then it just stops there. And aren't we more interested in flourishing? I think human flourishing is what I'm really curious about. How can we use non-duality, and I'm going to say uniduality because I don't think non-duality fits it, to lead to human
flourish.
flourishing. And you said
Yeah.
that the universe is, I think, blossoming into God.
Yeah, flowering, blossoming into God. That's another image which we didn't get into in the conversation about
Yeah, I love that.
non-duality, which is the idea that there's an awful lot in the... Actually, no, I actually think I'm open to the possibility that it's actually a reflection of the actual evolutionary process itself. That at a certain point, around the Axle Age, 500 BC or something like that, where a lot of these traditions start, and you get all of these figures, often mythological figures, semi-historical, something, where people are glimpsing these non-dual or oneness states as an escape.
Yeah.
And then later you get, for instance, one example, a big one obviously, is the Christianity. So 500 years later, maybe, so from 500 BC, to up to 0, as we call it. What you arrives then is a whole new idea, where you've got the idea of a God, a oneness, which is a being of love. I mean, actually, you get that statement. I mean, there's in the letter of John, God is love, and those that live in God live in love, and God lives in them. I mean, amazing statement. That's a whole new thing. And you've gone from the idea of deities as like tribal gods, thunder gods, all this sort of thing in conflict. Not certainly not loving and, not trustworthy.
Not so much.
Not people you kind of go, they may help you. They're like the forces of nature. They feed you, but they may kill you.
Exactly.
You don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And then you've got this kind of love. And if you look at the mystical literature, you've got these two traditions. One is kind of, look, it's all horrible, dissolve back into the primal emptiness.
Yes.
And then you've got this new tradition, which is like, no, move forward into this emergent love, serve, bring the love into the world. It will be, I mean, it's also originally very world denying, but it will become more world enhancing.
Right.
So I love that idea, and the idea that what we're waking up to is in fact a higher level of emergence than we are. And the thing that really moves me is the idea that actually that is arising through us waking up.
Right.
That as we wake up into oneness, this
Exactly.
unitary soul,
Yeah.
which you could call God, although it's a very different version of God, because it's not God at the beginning, it's God which is arising. Pierre Terre de Chardin has this.
I never knew how to pronounce that name. Thank you.
Yeah, he has a kind of different way of saying it, but essentially it's the same thing. It's like this idea of, and then you've got a completely different vision, because it's not. It feels like there's a theory, there's that kind of it's all fucked up theory.
Yeah.
Which is we've got into this confusion. God's
put an
fallen
end
into
to
this. Get back to how it was originally, and dissolve back into the ocean of emptiness, and it'll all be much better for it because you've been a big, the whole thing's been a mistake.
Exactly.
You've been a mistake.
Yeah.
Versus, no, it's all flowering into something so beautiful you can't imagine.
And if you don't like where it's gone or where it's going, we can change it. But we need to emerge to this unividual level.
Yeah.
And that's where the
that's
possibilities
the key,
open.
That and that's where it has meaning.
Yeah.
Because it goes, look, we are part of that process. And the idea, the idea I want to put out and let people contemplate is the idea that presence that we can experience as God, that thing which is greater than us, which is so benign and benevolent, is actually made of us. It is like my body is made of all these individual cells.
Yeah.
It's a combination, a communion of all these individual psyches or souls. And then suddenly you have a very different version.
It's night and day.
It is, isn't it? And so the unidual evolution arrives into this coming together, this both and coming together of the conscious oneness.
Yeah, that's where the optimism comes in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So was there anything else which struck you in what we were exploring and just wandering around in? Those are two big ideas that came up.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. I don't think there's anything else specific.
Good.
I'm sure tons of things will bubble up later when I'm not in front of you, but...
Yeah, good. Well, I really think it was good to come back and pick up those two things. One is, the idea that there's some final truth, and the opposite of that, which is their continual emergence.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the ways that those two things come together, and the idea that that emergence may be the universe flowering into God rather than having come from God, where those two things fit together for me is that you cannot arrive even at a final representation of truth if the very thing you're representing is always more.
Can you say that again?
You can't arrive, even if you take a rather clumsy version of truth that you're kind of representing reality accurately, which I don't think is quite right, really. But if you have that view, if the thing you're representing is continually becoming more, if you had to describe the whole universe, say you could, I mean obviously you can't, but say you could represent everything as it is, the soon as you'd said it, it's all changed. It's all become more than.
Right.
And if in that process of emergence, sometimes there's massive emergent jumps, you can't ever contain it.
So it's always moving.
It's moving.
You can't capture it
and more than, and more than,
always
and more than.
Every second.
So that, literally every second. So all of those old-fashioned ideas of truth, I think we need to abandon them.
Yeah, it makes sense to
and
me.
actually go, look, what we're looking for is understandings which are trustworthy to help us navigate what is a very complex thing. Another great thing, going on again, but another thing which is very attractive about non-duality, and the reason that we went from, when I was interested in non-duality, I had to go to India. There was no non-dual teachers, really, a handful. They weren't very famous, I didn't know them. And then suddenly there was like a non-dual teacher on every street corner.
Exactly.
It was like, everyone was a non-dual teacher, because it had an incredible simplicity to it, very attractive. All you've got to realise is there's no self, there's no doer, whatever the particular line is, and you're there.
Right.
You got it. Just enter that state. And, and you've arrived. Or if you haven't, and you can teach other people, because it's that. The difference between that and no, we live in an immensely complex, in which different people need to understand different elements of reality, because it's so vast and complex. And then we have to live in it. We have to live with biology. We have to live with psychology. We have to live with each other. We have to live with each other on different levels.
Exactly.
Some of whom are very awake and loving and caring, and some are not.
Exactly.
And dangerous.
Right.
And still living in the Middle Ages. And that we need the wisdom to navigate all of that with love.